This year, I decided it was probably a good idea to inspect the stuffing box packing prior to launch, since I had not done it since getting the boat in 2012. Before doing the inspection, I searched the internet looking for any information on the stuffing box and the drive system that I could find. After a lot of searching, I was not able to find anything. I even contacted the boat builder but found that they had had a fire back in 2003 and all their records burned up in the fire. Our stuffing box has a grease fitting on top of it. My dad says that we should give it a few squirts of grease after each use of the engine. It helps to keep water out and to lubricate the system. So I was feeling a little nervous as I started loosening the adjusting nut since I was not sure what to expect. Because of the access, backing off the adjusting nut took a little contortion but wasn't too difficult. Everything looked good, and the stuffing box packing didn't even look like it needed to be replaced. But when I went to tighten the adjusting nut back on, the entire stuffing box felt loose. That cannot be good. Based on some of the stuffing boxes I saw on the internet, I thought the mounting bolts for the stern tube went through the hull and attached to the stuffing box, and that since the stuffing box was loose, the bolts must have sheared. At this point, I decided it was a good idea to completely disassemble and inspect the drive system. I first removed the bolts holding the stern tube in place. I was then able to separate the stern tube from the hull after removing a lot of caulking. The stern tube was threaded onto a tube that is embedded in the hull. I then separated the stuffing box from the hull. It was also threaded onto the tube that is embedded in the hull. In order to pull the prop shaft, I would have to either drop the rudder so I could pull it out of the stern tube or pull the engine in order to pull it out from the stuffing box. Since dropping the rudder would have required the boat to be lifted about 4 feet and cost money to have the boatyard do it, I decided to pull the engine. Pulling the engine was uneventful. Separating the engine from the shaft adapter and the dampener and removing the mounting bolts was not too difficult. And with the engine out of the way, we decided to take the opportunity to give the area a good cleaning. I customized an old wheel puller I had from a long-forgotten project to pull the prop. Customizing the puller required cutting the 12-inch screw to about 1 3/4 inches, so that I could fit it between the prop and the rudder. It took an hour for me to cut through the hardened steel screw using a hacksaw. After pulling the prop, I was able to pull the prop shaft and then remove the stuffing box and the stern tube. I brought all the pieces to work and blasted them clean. Also had the guys from work remove the prop shaft from the badly rusted shaft adapter. They had to use a lot of heat and a hydraulic press to get it off. After cleaning the prop, I found a stamp on it. The manufacturer was Michigan Prop. I contacted them to see if they had any information on the drive system's other components. They didn't, but put me in touch with a local business that might, Air Marine. Air Marine wasn't familiar with the drive system either, but did help me figure out that the stern tube was missing a Cutlass bearing. In addition to a new Cutlass bearing, it was obvious that we needed a new shaft adapter and dampener. I also needed new bolts from silicon bronze for mounting the stern tube and the stuffing box. I found Deep Blue Yacht Supply out of Florida on the internet. I emailed them details on the engine, the diameter of the prop shaft, and they spec'd the shaft adapter and the dampener and the Cutlass bearing. Mike at Deep Blue was very helpful. Finding new silicone bronze bolts to mount the stern tube in the stuffing box took more than I originally thought. I was not able to find the local source with on-hand inventory, and I ended up ordering them online from boltdepot.com. The new shaft adapter ID was 0.997 inches, and the prop shaft's OD was 1.007 inches. So I bought a roll of emery cloth from the local hardware store and polished the prop shaft until it fit in the new shaft adapter. I also polished the prop end to ensure a good fit. The Cutlass bearing comes in two lengths, 4 inches and 6 inches. I only needed 1.7 inches. Mike at Deep Blue Yacht Supply said it was okay to cut the Cutlass bearing to length as I needed using a bandsaw. I was able to get 2 out of the one I bought, so now I have a spare. Prior to pressing the Cutlass bearing into the stern tube, I put it in the freezer for 24 hours to cause it to contract. It pressed smoothly into the stern tube once I tried it the next day. Reinstalling the drive system went fairly smoothly. I installed the new shaft adapter onto the prop shaft at home. The shaft screws on the new shaft adapter are at a different angle to the key and at different points along the length of the adapter compared to the original one. I drilled or dimpled the shaft at the area where the new set screws engaged the shaft, so they would engage the same way the old ones did. In order to try and ensure that the amount of the prop shaft that extended out of the stern tube was the same, I measured the distance between the end of the shaft and the old shaft adapter flange and ensured that the new shaft adapter was the same. Back at the boat, we first reinstalled the stuffing box. I drilled and tapped new holes for the new bolts. I used Teflon thread sealant on the threads between the stuffing box and the tube that passes through the hull, and we used 3M's 4200 sealant. We next installed the dampener on the engine side, torquing the bolts as the instructions indicated. The next step was to reinstall the stern tube. I retapped the existing holes, used Teflon thread sealant on the threads between the stern tube and the tube that passes through the hole, and again used the 3M 4200 sealant. We then ran safety wire through the shaft adapter set screws to prevent them from loosening, and then reinstalled the prop shaft and the prop. Next, we installed new stuffing box packing. Finally, we moved the engine back onto its mounts and loosely put new stainless steel mounting bolts in place. When we brought the new shaft adapter to the dampener, we found that the mating holes to be about 25% of the bolt diameter off from one another. We had to lower the front end of the engine in order to get the back of the engine to come up and properly align with the shaft adapter. All told, it took 7 weeks from start to finish to complete the project.